Welcome subcommittee members and members of the public to this October 25th, 2023 Governor's Workforce Development Board Barriers and Underserved Populations Meeting. For the record, my name is Ken Evans, Chair of the Barriers and Underserved Populations Subcommittee. Katie, will you please take roll call, confirm a quorum, and verify posting?
Sure thing. Okay, so first we have Chair Evans.
Present.
Thank you. Vice Chair Tyler Garner.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we have Susan Brager.
Present.
Thank you. Lori Calderon. Okay, George Galt. Oh, Mr. Chair, George informed me he has a doctorate appointment prior to the meeting. We have Jerry Barrett. Jerry, can you mark yourself present?
Oh, present.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, Evelyn Thompson Hilbert.
Present.
Okay, we have Dave Drybelbis.
Here.
Great, thank you. Crystal Slaughter.
Present.
Thank you. Okay, and then three other absences that were expressed to me earlier was Brittany Brown, Derek Jimpy, and Michael Yoder. So with that, we have 7 present. And this is Katie Gilbertson and Governor's Office of Workforce Innovation. For the record, I hereby affirm that this October 25th, 2023 Governor's Workforce Development Board Barriers and Underserved Population Subcommittee meeting is reached our quorum. I further affirm that the agenda and notice for this meeting were properly posted pursuant to Nevada's open meeting law, NRS 241020.
Thank you very much, Katie. Before we proceed, I kindly request that anyone who speaks today identify themselves for the record. Additionally, if you are not a member of the subcommittee, please wait to be called upon by myself or give feedback during public comment. And with that, we'll move on to agenda item number 4, public comments. Members of the public on remote technology are invited to provide comments at this time. No action may be taken on any matters during public comment period until the matter itself has been included on an agenda as an item for possible action. Any public comments on the telephone? Any public comments on Zoom? Hearing none, we'll close out the first public comments section or session and move on to agenda item number 5 for possible action. Is there any discussion before I call for a motion to approve the July 26, 2023 Barriers and Underserved Populations Subcommittee meeting minutes? Hearing no further discussion, I call for a motion to approve the July 26, 2023 Barriers and Underserved Populations Subcommittee meeting minutes. Do I have a motion?
Jared Merritt, for the record, I move that we approve.
Do I have a second?
Crystal Slaughter, for the record. Oh, go ahead. Crystal Slaughter, for the record, I second it.
All right, thank you both very much. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Please let the record reflect that the motion carries. Moving on to agenda item number 6 for discussion / information only, I would like to recognize Katie Gilbertson, policy analyst, for going to quickly discuss subcommittee membership revisions. Ms. Gilbertson?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Katie Gilbertson with Going for the Record. So earlier in August this year, the full board approved some bylaws revisions for the full board. So then that means that the subcommittee membership has changed. So now we have a membership cap of 11 people for a subcommittee. This was done just to make it easier to reach quorum. Some of the subcommittees, especially the strategic planning subcommittee, it had 17 members. This one now has 13. So it was getting kind of difficult to reach quorum. So these bylaws revisions were done so that it'd be easier to reach quorum, and then we can get more accomplished in the subcommittee meetings, make them more of an actionable vehicle, right? So now that there's going to be an 11-member cap, and there can be 3 non-board members on a subcommittee, but that doesn't have to be the case. That's just the allowable percentage. So currently on this subcommittee, we have 13 members. So 2 of them are going to have to be removed, and we'll have to look at attendance when considering that, but we haven't taken any formal action on that yet. This is just kind of like a heads up on that. And I don't know if Chair Evans wants to say anything else about that, but.
Yeah, what I'll say for the record, Chair Evans here, for the record, again, the reason why we're doing this is so that we can function as efficiently and effectively as possible as an overall board, subject to assigning board members to subcommittees. At the same time, there's room for us to get key stakeholders from the community involved in one of those 3 positions that are permissible for non-board members. As far as determining the ongoing composition of the board, what I'd like to suggest or mention for your consideration is 2 things. Number 1, if you have a strong desire to continue to serve on this subcommittee or other subcommittees, please let Chair Anderson or myself know. And then at the same time, again, as Ms. Gilbertson suggested, in the event that we do need to pare down any of the subcommittees, we will take a look at past participation. Although what I'll say to that is we are trying to encourage all the board members to serve on at least one subcommittee. And with that, I'd like to ask, are there any questions for Ms. Gilbertson or myself regarding subcommittee structure, composition moving forward?
I have a question, Evelyn Thompson Hilbert, for the record. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes. So to be clear, I understand what you're saying in terms of the board and this composition of the subcommittees. Does that mean that we cannot invite additional people from the public beyond 3 at a time?
That is correct. Ken Evans,
Okay.
Vice or Chair Evans, for the record, that is correct.
Thank you. So you would need advance notice if we want to invite a guest.
Well, Chair Evans, for the record, guests are invited to attend the meetings. It's just in terms of inviting them to actually serve on the subcommittee that there's a limitation. I hope I'm interpreting and answering your question correctly.
I understand. Thank you.
All right, perfect. Yeah, we definitely don't want to preclude public participation or key stakeholder participation, but in terms of formal assignment, yes, there's a limit. Any other questions for Katie or myself? Seeing none, we'll move on to agenda item number 7 for discussion, information only. I'd like to recognize Vice Chair Tyler Garner and myself to share the new meeting template that we would like to use for the subcommittee moving forward. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to delegate and ask Dr. Tyler Garner to do this part of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Evans. Dr. Tiffany Tyler Garner for the record. For your consideration, we'd like to proffer this proposed meeting template. I'd like to begin by giving a thank you to Katie and Vice Chair Evans, and note that we welcome your feedback in support of us moving the work forward and taking action in a ways that are consistent with the charter of this subcommittee and the larger board, we'd like to propose the following meeting template. You will note that there are a few key standing elements we'd like to consider as a part of the work of the committee, including beyond the administrative items that any meeting includes, which are things like approving the meeting minutes or ensuring quorum, but that there be a specific focus on understanding the context of the work and issues impacting the committee, thus a request to have a standing data presentation. Two, a focus on what are the ways in which we can actually move the needle with a strong focus on programming, which you'll see here, but then also consideration to some things like regionality, making sure that we are ensuring statewide representation and supporting statewide coordination. Also, with us being a policy making body, or the governor's workforce development board being a policy entity, that there be some consideration after we hear each of the opportunities, whether that's the data or programming, that there be some discussion about policy recommendations that could be proffered or referred to the larger board through our chair here, Vice Chair Ken Evans, in support of the work. And then also the ability to look at system level issues that may be impacting the work or other contextual factors. So I want to give you a moment to review this proposed agenda. Note the really four key areas. One, that we will always make sure that the standard business of the committee happens, but that there be some intention around understanding the evolving context of the work, partnering to look at promising programming and practices, and ensuring that we support that to be implemented throughout the state where helpful. And then also understanding and a recognition of the nuances of the work and how those might vary by region, county, or other considerations, while staying in time or being responsive to the shifts in the work as they evolve. You will see that today is a great example of an opportunity to do that. Some of the presentations that will happen today include a presentation for vocational rehabilitation during a month where we are looking at workforce development and special needs. Also a presentation on trauma-informed workforce development as a way of contextualizing some of the opportunities and nuances of workforce development for the special populations of focus for this committee. And then also a presentation from not only follow-up from the larger governor's workforce development board, where we had the great privilege today of having the chair of the child care committee sharing on a particular organization, but also a focus on looking at regionality, including standing presentations from our Northern Workforce Board. Any questions for me or Vice Chair Evans regarding this meeting template?
Any feedback or thoughts? And while you may be gathering your thoughts, the idea behind this is to make sure that as a subcommittee, we start with data, build on data, take a look at best practices, and then intentionally move some things forward. So I want to say thank you very much to Dr. Tyler Garner for helping us prepare this and being the primary architect so that we can make sure that we operate efficiently and effectively moving forward and actually have an impact. And I'm not going to call on anyone, but I'm looking around. I don't see anybody's hand raised. So what I'll suggest is this, in the oh, go ahead.
Vice Chair, Evelyn Thompson Hilbert for the record. Sorry, I'm in transit, so I can't raise my hand at the moment. But I would like to compliment you guys on this template. I feel like it makes it much clearer and a greater opportunity for action, opposed to a lot of times what we all know happens in the committee. So I just want to acknowledge the work that you guys did with this, and thank you. And I look forward to participating in the new format.
Thank you very much. Again, Chair Evans, for the record, the other thing in my role as the vice chair, part of my responsibility is to try to help put structure in place, not just for this subcommittee, but for all the subcommittees. So what we can anticipate is we're benchmarking something that will be considered and tailored and edited in terms of the content and the subject matters covered, but the general structure, I think, is something we're going to consider adopting for the other two subcommittees as well moving forward. Okay, I don't see any other questions for Vice Chair Tyler Garner or myself. So again, what we'll do is we'll move with this template with the understanding that there may be feedback that you may want to give us at some point in the future. But other than that, we'll plan to use this format. Thank you again. With that, we'll move on to agenda item number 8 for possible action. Is there any discussion before I call for a motion to approve the new meeting template? Other than the feedback given to us by Ms. Thompson-Hilbert. Okay. Is there someone there that had some feedback, or I saw someone on mute?
Oh, hi, Chair Evans. This is Nicole Ting from the Attorney General's office. My recommendation would be to re-agendize this for an action item if you were to entertain and then vote on a motion to approve the new meeting template.
Okay, so bring it back at a future meeting since we introduced it today, if I'm hearing you correctly.
Yeah, since it was agendized for discussion, informational only. Yeah, my recommendation would be for next agendized for an action item. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're correct. You're correct. Yeah, as soon as you said it, that's right. We did notice it in that manner. So we'll bring it back at a future meeting to take action on.
Oh, Chair Evans, you have it as Katie Gilbertson for the record. You have it as number 8 as for possible action. Would that suffice?
Oh yeah, you do. Sorry, I was looking at number 7. It is for possible action, vote on new meeting template. My apologies.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay, so we'll go ahead and move to agenda item number 8 for possible action. I'd like to call for a motion to approve the new meeting template. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion, Evelyn Thompson-Hilbert, for the record.
Do I have a second?
Dave Drivelbus, for the record, I'll second.
All right. And finally, any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Please let the record reflect the motion carries. Thank you all very much. And thank you again, Dr. Tyler Garner and Ms. Gilbertson. Moving on to agenda item number 9 for discussion, information only. I would like to recognize Dieter Chief Economist David Smith to present a data update on the underserved populations that the subcommittee is focused on. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and members of the subcommittee. Let's get my presentation up on the screen now. Of course, I am excited about the idea of a standing data agenda item, and I'm happy to support as needed, pending the availability of the data that you're looking for. For the record, my name is David Schmidt. I'm the Chief Economist for the Research and Analysis Bureau in the Nevada Department of Employment Training and Rehabilitation. And I'm here today sort of following a lot of the items that were listed in that proposed template. I'd like to start with a high-level picture of what's going on in the state very quickly. Up on your screen, you can see the current employment levels for the state as well as for Las Vegas and Reno. Our growth rate over the last year in the state has been 3.4%, and you can see that's closely mirrored in both Las Vegas and Reno. 3.4% was good for #1 in the country. We have been #1 or #2 in employment growth, basically going back to when we started to recover from the COVID recession. In the most recent month, from August to September, we did see a little bit of an acceleration in some of our data. And so it was a pretty strong month for Nevada, as it was for the US as a whole. Looking at our unemployment data, we also have the highest unemployment rate in the country at 5.4%, as has been the case for most of the last couple of years. We do see our labor force participation rate increasing. This is the share of the population 16 or older that's not in an institution that is either working or looking for work. The total number of people estimated to be unemployed is 86,000 in the state, with about 1.5 million people employed. This pushes our labor force above 1.6 million people for the first time. Just for comparison, we passed the 1.5 million mark about 5 years ago, and we had 800,000 people. So we've doubled in about the last 30 years. It was, I believe, 1994 when Nevada had just 800,000 people in its labor force. And it helps to think back through Nevada's history about just how fast we've been growing and trying to get this large increase in our population into the workforce working and productive. And so the overall summary is Nevada has the highest employment growth in the nation and the highest unemployment rate in the nation. Looking at how we measure up, here you can see that #1 mark from September. And you can see that Texas, Idaho, Wyoming, South Dakota, Florida, Delaware, Washington, Massachusetts are the states that come behind us in terms of employment growth. This gap lead is a little bit narrower than it was. Back in August, we were at 3.9 and Texas was at 3.0%. But we've been in this ballpark of about 3 to 4% employment growth for much of the past year. And we continue to remain pretty strong in that. Where the growth is coming from is kind of interesting. This looks at our leisure and hospitality employment growth. And you can see we're far from the #1 state in terms of the rate of growth in the leisure and hospitality industry, though we are growing and we're in the top half of states. Because Nevada has a significantly higher concentration of leisure and hospitality jobs than other states, we have about 22% of our state is in leisure and hospitality. Outside of about 6 other states, there's no one with 10% of their jobs in leisure and hospitality. This is in large part due to the presence of the casino hotel industry. And so that 5% growth for us is a more significant number than it would be for most other states because of how many jobs we have there. But some of the areas where we're seeing stronger growth include professional and business services, as well as what you can see on the screen, professional, scientific, and technical services. So this is more highly skilled jobs that tend to come with higher rates of pay, and it's an area where we are growing relatively rapidly. We're up 9.1% in the past year in this particular industry. We're also growing pretty rapidly in manufacturing, where we're up 4%, which is good for #4 in the country. And you can see roughly half of states are growing and roughly half of states are shrinking in this particular industry. And I see Dr. Tyler Garner has her hand up.
Thank you, Dr. Tyler Garner, for a record. I just had a quick question about the professional, scientific, and technical services growth.
Yes.
You noted that those tend to be higher skilled jobs. Do we know much about that labor force? Are those individuals that are existing Nevadans? Did they relocate to participate in that employment? Or do you have any sense of that?
No really specific details, at least on a monthly basis for this data. Outside of the fact that this is a subset of all professional and business services, and that these are more things like accountants or architects or professional scientific company. Like if you send gold off to be assayed somewhere and you have a chemist working on it, it's probably in this scientific and technical services type of industry. And so it spans a lot of different things. As far as who is coming here, I would guess, just given the growth rate, 9.1% is a pretty fast rate of growth. So it's most likely that this is growth within the state. Our population growth, like many other states, has not been incredibly rapid. We might be seeing some of this from as growth from people coming from outside the state, but it's probably more people within the state overall. So we are continuing to grow also in the manufacturing industry. And this is just sort of to get a sense of the fact that we are seeing growth in a lot of different industries showing up in a lot of different places. I believe I've shared this chart before, but no, to provide an update from last quarter, I think it's also important to note that as we talk about the people who are unemployed and the fact that we have that high unemployment rate, that what we're seeing is an increase in unemployment that's really due to people who did not lose their last job and people who have been unemployed for roughly 3 months or less. In particular, people that have been unemployed 5 weeks or less. Nevada is fairly unique in seeing a significant increase in unemployment from these populations. If we were flat like most states, our unemployment rate would be closer to 4%. But I think it's worth saying, I think it's better economically for the state to be at 5.5% unemployment with people moving back into the workforce than it is to be at 4% where you're not seeing that trend. Because we have this growth of people coming in and back into the workforce, it's easier for employers to find workers and for companies to expand, and it generally helps to keep the ball rolling. A state that has very low unemployment like Montana, and I'll pause in just a moment, has very low unemployment, very high wage growth because there's incredible competition for jobs, and very low employment growth because there's just not the people to be coming in to the workforce to keep the ball rolling. And Dr. Tyler Garner, you have a question?
Thank you, Dr. Tiffany Tyler Garner. For the record, do you have a sense of who these returners are? Are these individuals, for example, that may have a higher skill level, so their ability to return to the market is facilitated by that because they are in demand? Or are there a percentage of these individuals that may be participating in the rapid reemployment services that are afforded by the state? Or just any sense of, can you help us contextualize who these returners are? To know if there's some practice happening that is helpful or some other dynamic that would help us understand what action could be taken.
Yep. David Schmidt again for the record. Maybe something could be teased out, but it would be a bit of a challenge because of the frequency of data that we're looking at here. I think on a couple of slides, you'll see something that will help to address that question a little bit. But I also note that the scale of the jump that we're looking at here is about 15,000 people. And that's pretty significantly larger than most of the employment and training programs that we have. I think it's really important, especially in the context of the work of this committee, that there are very large numbers of people moving back and forth, and the bandwidth to provide services is a lot more limited than that overall population. And so it's, I think the workforce efforts help on the margin, but there's a lot of other flow taking place at the same time. And I would probably say that most, but probably not all of this is the normal recovery that we see as wages are going up, jobs are expanding, and there's more opportunity for people overall to be coming back into the workforce. Taking a look at the mixture of short and long-term unemployment, I also think it's worth highlighting that where Nevada really has the higher levels of unemployment is in that short-term unemployment space. Short-term unemployment isn't necessarily a good or a bad thing. It tends to go up right at the start of a recession when a lot of people lose their jobs. But that's why the fact that we have both unemployment from people who didn't lose their jobs and short-term unemployment rising at the same time tells us that this is more people coming back into the workforce, that it's not people losing their jobs and going out looking for work, but it is people who are on the sidelines coming back in. If we look at long-term unemployment, Nevada is a bit elevated compared to most states, but there are several other states that also have long-term unemployment at or above the level that we're at now. So it's really in that short-term unemployment picture where Nevada is higher. I think because we do have more good unemployment coming back into the workforce. That, you know, someone going on the sidelines being out of the labor force who begins to look for work and then relatively quickly is finding a job is sort of how I would characterize broadly what we're seeing here. To look a little bit at the unemployment rates that we see for different educational groups. We have seen some pretty significant improvements in people who have less than a high school degree or a high school degree. Those are the people who were most impacted in the pandemic. Here, if you look back to this same 12-month period in September of 2020, you can see we had unemployment, particularly in the less than a bachelor's degree space, up above 11%, where now most groups are below 5%. People who have a high school degree but no college do have a slightly higher rate at 5.7%, compared to 4.8% for people who have some college or an associate's degree, or 3.6% for people with a bachelor's degree. Dr. Tyler Garner.
Thank you, Dr. Tiffany Tyler Garner. For the record, this looks promising. It appears that if you looked at from September 2020 till September of this year, that all of those rates are like literally cut in half, right? And so I'm wondering, is it the result of like more employment opportunities? Is there a role that maybe upskilling played or reskilling? Like, how do we account for, or was it just that folks returned to work because we were coming out of the pandemic?
David Schmidt, for the record, I think that is the largest factor that you see here. Obviously September 2020, since this is a 12-month average, this is right in the middle of the pandemic. It's in the middle of all of the extended unemployment benefit programs. September of 2021 still is 12 months where that's largely the case, because most of the extended unemployment programs ended at the beginning of September of 2021. We did see some pretty rapid improvement into 2022 and 2023, where actually the people who have less than a high school degree saw a bit of an uptick in their unemployment rate. I think because we have more of those people re-engaging, because as a typical recession will have several years of unemployment going up, unemployment going down. This recession was unlike anything else because it started in March and it ended in May. And it's 2-month disruption that had the employment impact that was roughly double what we saw in the Great Recession in the state. And so it takes time for people who have been dislocated from work, especially in jobs that provide support to other jobs being found. As people get back into place, more of those dots start to be connected, and there's a better landscape for people to go and get work. Obviously, at the same time, we saw very large spikes in the wages that were being paid. And so as people are able to earn a higher wage and be attracted back into the workforce, that's probably playing a role in these numbers too. And I also like to highlight, as I've looked at a lot of these tables, because this is a piece of a larger report, it's really interesting to me that one of the most comparable years, generally speaking, is 2017 in this 12-month average data. So if we look back about 6 years, a lot of the numbers are pretty similar in terms of the rates of people that are unemployed or the numbers of people that are in different categories. And I think that helps for me to think about where we are, that it's a sort of mid-recovery type of number. It's not the absolute peak when everything is running red hot. It's not the depths of the recession when everything is ice cold, but it's that sort of growth toward a more stable and sustainable economic landscape. And I think that's also helpful context for these numbers. Dr. Tyler Garner.
Thank you, Dr. Tyler Garner, for the record. So just as a clarifying question, or I just want to affirm whether or not this would be an accurate statement. There was much concern during the pandemic about job loss generally as a result of either AI or the efficiencies that resulted in response to the pandemic. Can we safely say that we did not see that materialize, those concerns?
David Schmidt, for the record. Being an economist, I feel the need to hedge absolutely everything. I would say there's probably been some of that. If you look at the casino industry in particular, it's still down compared to the highest employment that it had in the year before the pandemic. We're down about 20,000 jobs. If you look at February of 2020 to now, that number is a little bit smaller because as a industry that's been pretty much flat to slightly down in its overall employment trend, the peak was back in March of 2019, not February of 2020. But there's still been more than 10,000 jobs fewer that we have in the casino industry now than we had prior to the pandemic. And that's despite the fact that gaming win has been $1 billion plus for over a year and a half, 2 years, like a very long streak that I don't have off the top of my head. But gaming win is doing well, but we're still down about 10,000 jobs. So there, I think, has been a bit of a shift in the industry. It's not gone. It's 88%, 90% of what it was. So it's still largely similar, but it has changed. And that's pretty typical for most industries in a recession. As you go through a pinch and a crunch, people with entrepreneurial spirit and creativity try to figure out, how can I exist and thrive in a different landscape? How can I survive and hold on? And those changes will continue to inform the way that businesses operate, even as they recover and start to expand again. And so I think there has been some change, but I don't think there has been a wholesale replacement of entire industries. And I think the future going forward is more likely to be informed by how jobs change and adapt and come to incorporate using new tools, as opposed to AI will simply replace the jobs sort of picture. At least that's how I think about it, but that's a big and complicated question. Just to highlight another table from this same report, and how we've seen changes in the number of people that are entering the workforce, people who are unemployed because they left their previous job, and the number of people who are unemployed because they lost a job. It helps me, I sort of think of this as, you have the first column, which is everyone who lost a job. And then you have the other three, which is people who voluntarily left. They left their last job. They are re-entering the workforce. They were out of the labor force for a time and are coming back in, or they are a new entrant to the workforce. So they have never been in the labor force before, and now they are in and looking for work. And so I sort of add up the three columns on the right and compare it to the column on the left, and that gives you a sense of what's the balance of where is unemployment coming from in the state. And if you add those up, there's about 43,000 people who are left their previous job or entering the workforce, and about 40,000 people unemployed because they lost their previous job. So it would not be, it's not that there's nobody who is losing a job. It's about half of the people who are unemployed, but it's the smaller half. And you can see the trends going back. And again, if you look at 2017, very similar numbers in a lot of respects. 37,000 people who lost their job, 12,000 people who left a job, 17,000 people re-entering, 7,800 people who are new entrants. Close, not exactly the same, but sort of reinforces that that's sort of where we are. To Dr. Tyler Garner's point earlier, something else that I've been taking a look at is what's happening with labor force participation. As people are coming from out of the labor force into the labor force, we should expect to see labor force participation, the share of the population in the labor force, rising at the same time. This chart breaks down participation into 4 categories. On the left-hand side, you have older workers who are 55 to 64, and people who are 65 plus, which I call retirement age here. You can see on the left scale that participation, especially over the age of 65, tends to be much, much lower. Its average is about 20% right now, compared to over 62% for people who are 55 to 64. If you look at prime age workers, people 25 to 64, this group tends to have very high participation because these are people's primary working years, post-college and before most people are getting close to retirement. And I think it helps to see our prime age participation rate has been increasing. I'll note these are 12-month averages from the raw current population survey data, and so they tend to be a bit more volatile. But our current level of participation is actually higher than any time that we saw outside of the end of the last expansion in 2018, 2019. It's higher than we saw from 2011 through about 2018. And it's also comparable to where we were right before the housing boom really got going in 2005 and 2006. And so for those people in their prime working years, the participation picture is pretty good. If you look, though, at people who are 16 to 24, this is where we have seen a larger shift down, where participation in 2005 and 2006 was about 65%. Now it's about 55% today. This might be because people are staying in school longer, or more people are going to college and not working at the same time, because this is both 16 to 18 and also 18 to 24 or so. So this could be shift in people's behavior due to not working while in school. If they're a full-time student and not working, they would be outside of the labor force, and that would push the participation rate down. But we can also break this up, because it comes from the raw survey data, into what's happening with men and what's happening with women. I think that the trends coming out of the COVID recession here are also kind of helpful, especially for prime age workers. You can see that for men, we're not actually above that 2011 to 2018 period. We're kind of on trend. We're closer to the average that we've been, and we are still down a few percentage points from where we were in the housing boom. Because housing was really driven by construction and the expansion of that industry, which tends to be very heavily dominated by men. That participation rate has come down a little bit. So there's been a bit of a shift. And you can see that for youth, this number has been declining and is still going down. It's not that sort of flat trend that we had for the population as a whole, but instead, again, we're lower than we were in that 2018 to 2020 period. The picture for women is in some ways the reverse. There has been a stronger rebound in prime age participation, though the overall level is lower. Women are participating at about 75% rate as opposed to an 85 to 90% rate. Where the numbers are the closest is for the youth group. People who are 16 to 24, there's only a couple of percentage points difference between men and women compared to other age groups where it tends to be 10 to 15 percentage points difference in terms of participation in the workforce. And so there are a higher share of women than men that are not participating, that are neither working nor looking for work as we look through the data here. And I think this also reflects where we are seeing some growth in jobs. The healthcare industry has been expanding, as well as skilled nursing occupations, which tends to be more dominated by women than men as well. And I think that's because that's been a big part of our employment growth recently. That's probably, we're seeing that in terms of participation, and it probably means that things like childcare are becoming easier for people to access. And Dr. Tyler.
Dr. Tiffany Tyler Gunner for the record. I think you may have answered my question. I was going to ask, what is that gender difference in prime age labor force participation? There appears to be about a somewhere between 10 and 20% difference. And I was wondering if it's a result of childcare or caregiving or other factors.
David Schmidt again for the record. So the rate for men is a little bit less than 90%. The rate for women is about 75%. So there's about a 15 percentage point gap, roughly speaking. And it could be a number of things. It could be people who are unable to find work. It could be people who are voluntarily staying home and are making the choice to be a single income household where the woman is staying home with children. It could be, for social or other reasons. Any number of things could cause this. We don't really have that answer. The reasons for non-participation in this survey tend to fall into the very helpful category of other. I see a couple of hands up now.
Yeah, Chair Evans, Ken Evans for the record. My quick question would be, as we move, first and foremost, thank you for this data because it kind of gives us the foundation for other discussions. But as we move forward, just how finite or discrete can the information be so that we can be aided in knowing what the factors are so that we can bring about systemic change as appropriate?
David Schmidt for the record. So That is a tricky question to answer because we have to think about what the sources of the data are. For example, this data is coming from the current population survey. This is a monthly survey that's conducted nationally, and the data is actually publicly available. I just pulled this off the internet, but it's not super easy to understand unless you know what you're looking at. But this has a sample size of about 850 households in the state every month. And the response rate for that survey is about 2/3. And so we have about 600 households that provide all of the data that goes into this. And so if you want to look at a very specific group, you very quickly get to the point where you may have one or two people who are actually providing the basis for the data. And so the numbers can move around a lot if you want to drill down very, very deep. There's also the American Community Survey, which has annual data available. It has a larger sample size that's about, I want to say 25, 30,000. I might be getting that number wrong. Nationally, it goes into a lot more detail and has a lot more data available, but it's only available annually. And it's still, depending on how deep you want to dive, it can be a bit tricky. It also has microdata available that we can use to get to some of this. And I actually use it for the discouraged or the disconnected, youth that I'm transitioning to right after this. If we want comprehensive data in the state, we start to lose a lot of the demographic detail, but we can talk a lot more about, here are the average wages that everybody earns. There is some data from the Census Bureau that combines that wage data with data that only the Census Bureau has, and they produce some common aggregates. So you can look at things like the rate, wages, turnover rates, and other details for some high-level demographic groups by industry in the state, but it's sort of necessarily limited in how detailed you can actually get about individual people to do that. And so it's always kind of a dance of what do you want to know, what's the best data source to represent it, or how can you kind of try a few different perspectives to paint as comprehensive a picture as possible.
Thank you for that context. Ms. Thompson-Hilbert.
You may have answered this. So I understand that you can't drill down, and of course, when you're trying to get an accurate snapshot with the number of the samples for the data. But my question is it possible to, with thinking about this subcommittee, is it possible to find out, since I know Dieter doesn't generate it, but the training aspect? In other words, I know we get a lot of the employment rates in and a lot of the employment figures. Is there any way that Dieter can capture or show us any information? I would prefer aggregate as many training programs, workforce development training programs as possible, but is there anything more collected or reported on in this capacity outside of, say, the local boards?
David Schmidt again for the record. And when you say training data, are you thinking like how many, what are the populations being served? What are their characteristics?
Exactly.
What are their outcomes after the fact? What types of training programs are they participating in? Things of that nature.
Things of that nature, but when I'm looking at the data here that's collected for employment and understanding, of course, the more granular we get, the more it's harder to see the trends. But in other words, all that you described, maybe even not in as much detail, so that we could look at workforce development training programs side by side to employment rates. Does that make sense? And I'm sorry, Evelyn Thompson-Hilbert for the record.
Yeah, David Schmidt for the record. And I think at least some of that can be done. I know there's in other contexts also some efforts to work on bringing some of the workforce data that we do have into Empower, the state's longitudinal data system, and to make some of that data a bit more accessible. using data from the administrative data from the training programs that are participants in WIOA. And so that there are some additional details and some additional factors that we'll be able to bring in there, like, compared to the size of various occupations or industries in the state, what occupations and industries are the people who receive training going into, or what occupations and industries are a slice of the people who are receiving WIOA training going into. So there are some ways that we can kind of take that data and use it. It's obviously not comprehensive because not all training is WIOA training, but it is the, what are the things that, collectively we sort of have our hands on at least.
Exactly. Thank you, Evelyn Thompson-Hilbert, for the record. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about, because specifically when we're talking in this committee about the vulnerable populations where there are issues with employment, I think it would be really helpful to at least look at that data side by side, and then see what comes of that.
David Schmidt again for the record, and it feels weird as someone presenting to ask a question, but I don't know the answer to this, and I don't know if the vice chair has seen it. I know that the Department of Labor puts together a report that they share with the states about the sort of equitable outcomes in training participation or in WIOA programs more broadly. It might not just be training. But I was wondering if that report is something that y'all are familiar with, and if not, then I can at least ask and see, if that's something we can share and make you aware of at a future meeting potentially.
Yeah, Vice Chair Evans, for the record, I'm not familiar with it. The other thing I want to do is just let the subcommittee know and the presenter know, have about 5 minutes before we need to move on to the next agenda item. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm near the end and I will go quick. What I really wanted to get to today, and it's taken a while for me to get through everything else, is this report. I would highlight that it was Brett Miller from Workforce Connections that really highlighted this report for me, and I think it's an interesting thing and in line with the sorts of presentations we've done recently. The report is a disrupted year, and you have the link right there at the bottom, but it's looking at the concept of disconnected youth and trying to see and quantify and get details about people ages 16 to 24 who are neither in school nor working. And so as people who are sort of disconnected from the workforce at kind of a critical time to be starting to make those connections. And I have a couple of quotes here from the report highlighting how in Nevada, young women have one of the highest rates of being disconnected, 17.6% rate for women who are 16 to 24 and neither in school nor working. And that we have the highest share of Black disconnected youth, which they called astonishing. And it's one of the poor times to have the word astonishing in front of what's happening in your state. But almost 30% rate of Black youth being neither in school nor working. And so with this as sort of a starting context, I wanted to use some of the micro data we have from the American Community Survey, which I suspect they also used in this report, and try to answer who are they and where are they in the state. So I just have a few examples of that here. This is something we could drill down more into if it's beneficial for the subcommittee. But when you look at the sheer numbers of people, these use public use microdata areas, which have total populations of about 100,000 people. But looking at the state, the area where we have the highest number of people who are not in the labor force or in school. So specifically not even looking for work. If you were to chart it statewide, the only area that has this highest concentration of about 4,000 people is really located in central Las Vegas. From Sahara to Sunset and from Decatur to Sand Hill is roughly the square that we're talking about here, where there are about 4,000 people not in the labor force, not in school. So they're not working, they're not looking for work, and they're not in school. If we take that and look at the share of people who are unemployed, they are looking for work, but they're not in school. The highest concentration here also in Las Vegas. Here we have about 2,600 people, primarily in the North Las Vegas area. So you have people who are unemployed, they're looking for work, but they're not working and they're not in school. And this is sort of the eastern side of North Las Vegas, sort of from Decatur to the east. So we do have a little bit of capability to look at geographically from this annual data, where are some fairly specific subsectors. We're looking at their education status, we're looking at their labor force participation, we're looking at their age, and we're looking at their geographic location. It's still kind of a big area, but it is a little bit narrower than just somewhere in the state these people exist. You can also take a look at the household characteristics of these individuals. Because the titles are kind of long, I chopped them off on the chart, but highlight in some various charts what columns are that have some of the highest concentrations. Most people who are disconnected are in a married household with children present, or married with no children present. Those are the largest groups, particularly for 25 to 35. I kind of expanded the definition a little bit to sort of the early adult age, as well as that 16 to 24 age. But even among people 16 to 24, people who are married with or without children have the overall highest levels of this disconnected, not in labor force, or disconnected and unemployed categories. Another major group is people who have a female householder with no partner present and own children, or a female household with no partner present living with relatives, which was kind of an interesting category for me. I wasn't quite sure what to make of that, and we'll probably have to dig in more if there's really specific questions there. And then the next largest group is if you look at couples who are cohabiting, again, with or without children in the household. So it's not exclusively there are children and therefore there is a decision for some people to be out of the workforce or not, but in fact, we do have pretty high levels of people not in the labor force, regardless of whether there are their own children present in the household. And again, if this is something that we wanted to dive a little bit more into, we have the capacity to do that. And finally, I have the education data here to show that the most common group here is people who do have a high school diploma. For people who are 16 to 24, that's the largest group. As you move into slightly older workers, you do have, in particular, people with either some college that's less than a year or 1 or more years of college but no degree. And so there is that sort of some college but not yet into the associates or bachelor's or professional degree categories. All of this we can dive into more later, but this is sort of a first glance at that disconnected youth category. It was an interesting paper. I encourage other people to read it. I will be done talking now. Thank you very much for your time.
Yep, and Vice Chair Evans, or Chair Evans for the record, this is the type of data that we're looking for. Which, once again, what you're doing, Mr. Smith, is you're planting seeds for things we can ask questions about, but more importantly, take action on over the course of time. So thank you very much for your presentation. And thank you, board members, for your questions. And what I would also assume is that, Mr. Smith, you're available offline if people have follow-up questions or conversations they'd like to have as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
With that, we'll move on to agenda item number 10 for discussion and information only. I would like to recognize Parvana Carter, Good Jobs Northern Nevada Grant Project Director for Nevada Works, to present on the Good Jobs Northern Nevada Grant.
Thank you, Chair Evans. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to share about Nevada Works' Good Jobs Grant. Just a little bit of background for those of you that may not know. Nevada Works is a recipient of $14.8 million Good Jobs Challenge Grant through the U.S. Department of Commerce Economic Development Administration. We are very proud to be one of 32 Good Jobs Grant Challenge recipients. We were selected out of a pool of 509 applicants submitted from across the country. The Good Jobs Northern Nevada Grant focuses on providing training and jobs to underserved and underrepresented populations in healthcare, information technology, manufacturing and logistics sectors. These are the 4 sectors that have been considered to be the fastest growing in our region And Nevada Works is working to build partnerships within these sectors and training providers to help provide a skilled workforce talent pipeline. As I mentioned, this grant is focused on focuses on underserved populations in previous discussions with you. So those focus areas include those living within the rural areas of Northern Nevada. As we all know, rural parts of the country are very different and their needs are very different. So that's a major focus of this grant. We're also focusing on women, African Americans, tribal communities, Latinos, Asians, and others who traditionally have faced barriers when attempting to enter the workforce. These barriers can range from lacking the training and or skills that will allow them to move up in their career pathways, access to training opportunities, childcare, transportation, and broadband, just to name a few. Nevada Works has developed a memorandum of understanding, and we're partnering with community-based organizations to provide supportive services that include childcare, transportation, and food. This is an attempt to remove as many barriers as possible and to ensure the success of our applicants who are participating in the Good Jobs Northern Nevada initiative. We've also created partnerships with various businesses within the 4 targeted sectors of the grant to support us with job placement and post-training. And for some of those businesses that are participating in some of our sector partnership meetings, we've asked them to sign letters of commitment. And within those letters of commitment, they just basically are outlining to us how they agree to participate. Sometimes it's surveys to find out what are those entry to middle level skills that may be needed within those industries, and how many positions that they're willing to potentially hire for once we have applicants that are completed their training and are looking to go for interview and be placed. So a lot of those companies have agreed to, at minimum, seat those applicants that have gone for for interview so that they can potentially be hired by that company. And we understand that there's a lot beyond just training, there's culture and all of that. So we've utilized our career navigators. We have 5 of them. One of those is geared solely for our tribal nations, because we understand that their needs and barriers are very different than the other populations within the Northern Nevada area. And so we're utilizing them to conduct outreach with some of these businesses, go in and do some site visits to get a better understanding of what's happening within each of these industries at the individual companies, and to better understand their culture. So when they're talking to their applicants post training, they can kind of try to align them a little better with companies that might fit their needs when they're going in for interview. We're also working with 3 local community colleges in our region to develop training pathways within our 4 targeted sectors. We're working with them to expand industry credentialing and adult Title II integrated education and training programs. These are going to provide contextualized basic skills education in conjunction with industry credentials. These IET programs are considered a best practice in addressing barriers for adult learners. So this component is very important and a very different kind of way of introducing training in the Nevada training scope. We're basically looking at the majority of the people that are coming in under this grant as adult basic learners. So they've either been out of school for a while, or they may or may not have gained those skills when they were in schools. And so we're utilizing this integrated education and training to really have them introduce the math and English skills that align within that individual sector. So when they're going in for training, they're going to gain those skills that are actually used when it comes to reading, writing, and arithmetic within the particular sector that they're going to be working with. And so we are working with our community colleges to build that out. And that's basically those credentialing and those training pathways that we're working on. We've also met with industry over the last quarter of 2023 through our sector partnership meetings to develop and determine what are their needs in training and what's lacking. And then we've had these community colleges sit at the table to hear them so that we can start developing what is gaps within their training to build up that area that may be lacking currently. We've also been able to establish a tribal workforce development group through this project, and this reinforces our outreach with the tribal communities. Nevada Works is very proud of the work and relationships that we've built and been able to establish with these tribal communities. And we've discussed our Good Jobs Northern Nevada initiative with their leadership. We've also been very intentional in our interactions with the tribal nations and letting their leadership know that Nevada Works is here to help support their needs around workforce and to serve their communities by working to fill in whatever gaps may exist within their current programs. We were able to hold our first tribal workforce development group meetings with tribal leaders in October. We had 16 tribal leaders within workforce development from the Reno Sparks Indian Commission, the Washoe Walker River, Paiute Lake, Fallon, and Lovelock tribal communities, as well as the Nevada Indian Commission and UNR's Indigenous Relations Office. So we're really proud of this work that we've done with the tribal nations in Northern Nevada, and we've also been recognized by EDA with this work that we've done through the grant. We really had no relationship or interaction with the tribal communities prior to this grant. And through this grant, we've been able to be really intentional, like I mentioned before, with them and to let them know that we don't want anything from them. We're here to serve them. And so that's really been able for us to build that trust and for them to know that our goal is to help them in their workforce development needs and beyond. We're also committed to serving underserved populations, especially under this grant. We've had an experience with a tribal person going into a Dieter Career Hub to receive services. And we identified an opportunity for a better customer service experience at the Employee MV Career Hub. So we reached out to Dieter and had a conversation about the interaction. And through those conversations, we have a plan to mitigate these sorts of problems moving forward. And as well, through those conversations, Dieter has decided to begin providing cultural awareness training as part of their onboarding for staff. So we were really happy that we were able to take that negative experience and kind of turn it into something positive and a learning experience for their staff members. The conversations have also led to Dieter to begin to work with their staff to determine how best to provide services on site at reservations and tribal lands. And this is a great opportunity for tribal members to be able to access services that once were out of reach for the lack of access to transportation to get to an Employee MV Hub. As we all know, transportation is a major issue for just being able to walk into some of these hubs. So we're really excited about this opportunity to work with the tribes on site. And then we're also partnering with various organizations that provide services to the most underserved populations in our community. For example, our career navigators have established relationships with organizations such as Accept, which works with individuals with HIV and AIDS to provide their cohorts with the opportunity to access workforce training through our Good Jobs Northern Nevada initiative. We've also established partnerships with Black Wall Street through our career navigators to meet with our cohorts and provide information as to how to participate in training opportunities through our grant. And we're looking to provide supportive services through the Employee MV Career Hubs to all of these community organizations that we're connecting with if they don't already know services exist or if they don't already offer them. So these were just a few of the examples of the partnerships that we've established to provide and develop training opportunities and career pathways, and a means for those that are the most vulnerable in our communities to have economic mobility. So I thank you for the time. If there's any questions or time for questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Ken Evans for the record. Yes, we do have about 5 minutes for questions. Dr. Tyler Garner.
Thank you, Dr. Tyler Garner, for the record. I recognize that time is of the essence for us, and so I want to suggest a few areas for consideration that I can go through under new business and more appropriate. But I would love to know more about kind of indigenous or tribal workforce development needs. And as you met with those leaders, which I want to commend you for doing that work, what kinds of opportunities or challenges were noted? And so maybe another discussion or presentation specifically on those needs and some consideration around whether or not they should be a population of focus for this particular charge, if that's appropriate here. And then you also referenced there being a difference or some nuances about workforce development in Northern Nevada. Would love to hear more, maybe some other time, about what those nuances are, and in particular, what their implications are for the populations of focus for us, including individuals with special needs, women with children, And if it's indeed the case that in Northern Nevada, it's males of color that have a disproportionate unemployment rate. I believe at one point it was Latinx, maybe, and not African American there, but whatever the disparity is, what your work is suggesting about the opportunities to either move the needle or the nature of the challenge there. And so anything that you could briefly say about the distinctions or the nuance there, what's different, I guess it would be helpful to understand.
Thank you. Do you want me to answer that now, or is that something that you want me to come back to and talk about later? Oh, you're muted.
Still doing that after all this time. Sorry about that. Chair Evans, for the record, if you maybe could just take a minute and introduce maybe one or two things in response, but ideally what we would love is if you could be part of our standing agenda as you are available, just so we can follow up on things, because what you're doing is commendable. And we just want to make sure that as a subcommittee, we support what you're doing, and most importantly, take the lessons learned.
Thank you. Parvina Carter for the record, Nevada Works. So some of the opportunities and challenges for the tribes and the rural areas in Northern Nevada kind of go hand in hand. One of the major barriers is the access to internet. So broadband, lack thereof, is a major issue, and transportation. So I myself experienced this when we had our sector partnership meetings in Elko in October. I took the Amtrak on thinking that, I'm going to enjoy myself. So unfortunately, we ended up with almost a 4-hour delay. I got in after 2 a.m, and the cab company told me they don't have any drivers. They don't have any cars. I was a woman by myself, and, getting off of a train in a very rural area. And I just happenstance got lucky and was able to get a ride to the hotel. But so lack of transportation is the major issue, whether you're trying to get to and from work, to and from training, or the availability of broadband so that you can access online training. Those are major barriers for both the tribes as well as for those living in the rural areas. Because of the lack of either one of those, it makes it very difficult for somebody to be able to get out of poverty, because if they don't have a car, or there's not a bus line or some sort of system, public transportation system that runs beyond, 3 or 4 hour blocks a day, you can't get to maybe Great Basin College if you live in the Elko area, but you live maybe 30 miles outside of Elko proper. How are you going to get to Great Basin College to take a training course? If you don't have access to broadband, how are you going to take an online class to be able to get that course completed so that you can get that job and get that economic mobility going? So those were the two major areas. And then for tribes in general, I think it's just a matter of funding and the availability of them to be able to partner with other organizations that can really provide the support for them in a manner that allows them to feel that they're not going to be taken advantage of or another. So because of the history with tribal nations in the US, oftentimes it's kind of, we'll give you this, but then they dupe them out of, something else. And so we've been really, really strategic and intentional in our meetings with them to let them know that we don't want anything from them. We've even offered that if they apply for a grant, we'd be more than happy to support them in some way or another through that process as well. So that's I don't know if that answers your question.
Outstanding. And Chair Evans, for the record, Ms. Carter, outstanding. I quite often mention the fact that part of our goal is to have a more professional and culturally competent workforce development system on the front end in terms of awareness and access, and then on the back end, making sure that people get placed in the positions that provide a career and at a minimum a livable wage. You're definitely working on the first half in terms of access and awareness and doing your part and your team is doing its part. So I just want to make sure I publicly recognize that. And again, invite you back as well as in between meetings. You can anticipate some of the board members may have some follow-up, and it's all in the interest of doing what we can to support you as a subcommittee and ultimately as a full board. So thank you very much.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Chair. I appreciate the recognition. We're doing a lot of hard work here. I did want to, Carmen Carter, for the record, you did mention about the living wage. So that is a major component of this grant. We are required, in order to get credit for the work that we're doing in the placement of the 650 applicants that we're looking to place and train, for them to end up with a job that has a living wage and benefits. So that wage that they receive has to be above the median range of wages for that particular job within that sector, and it has to end up with the opportunity for benefits as well. So that's a big component.
Excellent, very good. And once again, Chair Evans, for the record, that's the reason why we'll be benchmarking and sharing information. And if I recall correctly, you're already in contact with your colleague, Mr. Cruz at Workforce Connections, as well as his team. So we're well on our way. So thank you very much again.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yep. With that, we'll close out agenda item number 10 and move forward with agenda item number 11 for discussion and information only. I would like to recognize one of our fellow board members, Evelyn Thompson Hilbert, UNLV Doctorate Candidate 2024, to present on trauma-informed research. Ms. Thompson Hilbert.
Thank you. I'm just getting ready to share my screen. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody. We already said my name for the record, and my goal today is actually, this is just picking up on more of the awareness and access from the previous presenter. So today I want to talk to you about increasing awareness about trauma-informed care in workforce development programs, and then get your feedback, which we've already been discussing, to present to the full board. But before we move on, since I'm discussing trauma, I just want to make sure that everybody understands it can be a very sensitive topic. Some of the stuff that I'm
going to just cut across on Peaceway. So it's usually pretty quick.
Yeah. Can we mute? Go ahead. Go ahead.
So again, my intervention is mindful informed trauma, trauma-informed workforce development. What you're going to see on each slide is a little tiny bomb. Some are going to be big and some are going to be smaller. Those represent the presence and unpredictability of trauma, and I'll be talking more about trauma in a second. It's very important to understand how prevalent trauma is in our society today, and it's only increasing. As of today, according to the National Council for Behavioral Health, 223.4 million, and this is adults, 70% of the adults have suffered at least one traumatic event in their life. So today I'm going to talk about a method that's part of the intervention that I'm going to be talking about in a moment, which is stop, drop, and breathe. I'm going to invite everybody to do a really quick exercise with me. I'm going to define what trauma is, some of the science and the cost behind it, what trauma-informed care means, and then what my intervention is. So if everybody will just bear with me for a minute, I have over 25 years of experience with facilitating and teaching mindfulness and meditation, and that is one of the part of the intervention that I'm going to be presenting today. Scientific evidence shows significant changes in the nervous system, in anxiety, dealing with cognitive functions, and of course, healing from trauma. So if everybody would humor me and just stop for a moment, drop all the activity we're talking about, and just take 3 deep breaths. And that is an example of one intervention, because we go, 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 and often without just taking that pause, we can exacerbate trauma, both in ourselves and in other people. So I want to be clear as I talk about defining trauma, that it does not necessarily mean abuse, although abuse is a form of trauma, but it's widespread, harmful, and most importantly, in direct correlation to this group, it is a costly public health problem. So I have a list, you wouldn't believe how long, I don't have it somewhere, of how many different types of trauma there are. I'm not going to go over them all today, but we want to take into account in a slide that I have coming up as the definition keeps expanding, as our world keeps rapidly changing. Oops, I forgot to say, hold on. I forgot to say the definition, which is trauma is an event, a series of events, a set of circumstances that is experienced by an individual as physically, emotionally, or feeling like it's life-threatening. And again, this is as it's experienced by the individual. So there is a science behind this, just like there's science behind mindfulness, which is whoever is interested in that, I can get you the research later. This is an emerging science called neuroscience, and it is specifically targeted to dealing with trauma. The Campaign for Trauma-Informed Policy and Practices have been sharing this and presenting this all over the country. So first of all, and it's really a paradigm shift. So neuroscience, which is a study of the brain and the nervous system that's adapted based on lived experience. Epigenetics is the research on how life experiences, including ancestral ones, how they affect our genes. And then it demonstrates the potential for adaptation to help species survive. Adverse childhood experiences, which I'm going to be expanding on more in a moment, and that's also directly related to this subcommittee. It reveals how the effects of childhood trauma in biology and behavior, and how the long-term impact on health and other social issues for individuals, families, and committees. And finally, resilience is the concept of healing and growth after difficult events. So one of the Kaiser Permanente and the CDC and Kaiser Permanente did a landmark study. Some of you may have heard of it. It's called the ACEs study. It's one of the largest investigations of childhood abuse, neglect, and household challenges. And it looks at the impact on life and health well after, and well-being well after adulthood. And so the original scale, I don't know if you guys can see my pointer, it's the inside where it says conventional ACEs. That is a scale based on 1 to 10. So each of these areas with inside where it says conventional under abuse, neglect, and household dysfunction represent one element or one variable on a scale of 1 to 10. Anything over 4 is considered high, so any combination thereof. However, as of 2000, I think it was 18, you'll see this outer region, and that is where the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration expanded ACEs to include bullying, living in foster care, racism, neighborhood safety, and community violence. And of course, that's growing today as we look at climate change, mass shootings, and the current wars that are unfolding. So this is an example of one untreated trauma and the impact. So we have what trauma is. Trauma informed is a practice or an intervention that seeks to help anyone that has been traumatized. And again, that could be refugees, that could be immigration. There's a lot of cross-sectoring in this. Now, the ACEs that I just spoke of, they represent just one trauma as it relates to childhood trauma. Untreated, this is a cost, an example, to employers. The productivity loss resulting from on-the-job employee mental health problems is $150 billion annually. Anxiety and depression, $125 billion annually. And substance abuse, $246 billion annually. And again, these are from employed individuals. So we know that these figures are even more, are even higher when we're looking at somebody, a lot of our target population who are trying to become employed. When we look at the barriers of the workforce development programs of people trying to get into the workplace. Sorry, my computer went up here. So economic costs of mental health conditions just overall cost U.S. employers up to $193.6 billion, $0.2 billion annually. And this is due to absenteeism and presenteeism, being there but doing other things. There's globally anxiety and depression and result that over $1 trillion of lost productivity each year, and that's globally. And then workplace stress in the US leads to $500 billion in annual loss of productivity. Again, these are with the people that are employed. When we look at the figures in the cost of our public health and our public services for a lot of the wraparound services that we have for our target populations in workforce development programs, the costs are even higher. So the campaign for trauma-informed policy and practices, its impacts and costs. The cost of inaction is actually, it's just priceless. Trauma is a major underlying cause of substance abuse, suicide, gun violence, school dropouts, poor health, and of course, for this committee, we have the disconnected youth. There is a direct correlation between trauma and the prevalent and expensive health conditions like diabetes, COPD, heart disease, cancer, high blood pressure, I could go on. It impacts every single community system and places additional burdens on our under-resourced services and communities like education, social services, legal services, and housing. So I could go on with a lot of the other data and statistics that I've collected, but these are just things to keep in mind. So trauma-informed care, what is it? Its definition is that it's, and actually it's a very loose definition. So trauma-informed Oregon. Oregon is one of the leading states in trauma-informed care, and they have an extensive resource online presence for anyone to use. They define trauma-informed care as an awareness of the prevalence of trauma, an understanding of the impact of trauma on physical, emotional, and mental health, as well as on behaviors and engagements in services, and an understanding that the current service systems can re-traumatize individuals. So again, if you look for one concise definition of trauma-informed care, it is an unfolding sector, so to speak, so you will not find one. You definitely will not find one as it pertains specifically to workforce development programs, which is why I'm doing this research. And sorry, my mouse keeps hitting my thing here. So trauma-informed characteristics we want to think about. It's a strength-based framework. They're grounded in an understanding that trauma, the impact of trauma, and they emphasize physical, psychological, and emotional safety. We want to think about the context of how we present our programs. It's wonderful that we are trying to help people, but we do want to consider, okay, see, I have the 5-minute warning here, so I'm going to move on. So we do want to think about all of the things of how we present these programs. There are 6 guiding principles, and I will go over them very quickly. It's safety, trustworthiness, and transparency, peer support, collaboration, empowerment and voice, and cultural and historical issues. My intervention that I've been researching for the last 3 years is a mindful trauma-informed care for adults in Nevada's workforce development system. And what that, sorry, this keeps jumping around. It's a multidisciplined approach to integrating my experience with mindfulness, trauma-informed care, workforce development, and public policy. I've developed a 4-phase pilot program that I'm actually partnering with Goodwill of Southern Nevada. The 4 phases, I can let anyone know who's interested in it. And the white paper will be out in the spring that will show the impact, logic models, evaluation plans, and a cost-benefit analysis. The reason for this, to run this pilot and why it's so important, is to inform local, state, and federal policy. There are policies at the federal level. There is an interagency task force on trauma-informed care with over 20 national agencies, federal agencies that are participating, but it's focused more on opioid rather than workforce development. And I think we can draw a lot upon that from their research. The bottom line is that everyone wins of trauma-informed care. Billions are saved in the public services area, 56% reduction in ER visits, and 98% reduction in school and suspension rates. Every dollar invested in prevention saves $35 per intervention. So we want to think about that return on investment in our programs. So thank you very much. Again, my name is Evelyn. I'm researching this at UNLV's Doctor of Public Policy program. I worked at CSN for over 10 years in DWED, and I scored 8 on the ACEs scale that I talked about before. I have the lived experience, and I look forward to talking with anybody that's interested in hopefully having our board and what we can do with task force and et cetera to move forward with this area. And I am going to stop sharing. Thank you all for your time.
All right, thank you very much. Before I make a comment, we have time one question or comment.
Dr. Tiffany Tyler Garner, for the record, what were the 4 phases?
The 4 phases was number 1, mindful one-on-one coaching. Sorry, I did zip through that. A focus groups that will inform the curriculum is the second one, so focus groups. The third one is a developed curriculum. And again, I'm working with Goodwill of Southern Nevada, customizing this. That will be informed by the information from the focus groups and assessments. And the fourth one, which is huge, is organizational change and recommendations. Without organizational change, it's just another intervention that goes by the wayside and ends up really re-traumatizing our target population all over again.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson-Hilbert. Chair Evans, for the record, I very quickly want to synopsize something, and then I'll invite you to co-sign or correct me or calibrate me. From my perspective, again, what we've talked about is the importance of having culturally competent systems, especially systems that increase awareness and access. And if I'm hearing you correctly, you're trying to make sure that A, we're proactive about addressing trauma, especially if it's keeping people, like right now, we're wondering why so many of these youth are disconnected. And if I'm hearing you correctly, part of what you want to study and provide some research and documentation on is why they're disconnected and things that we can do systemically to acknowledge that and come up with more culturally competent and professionally competent systems. Did I get that correct?
It's partially correct because there is a field of cultural competency. What I want to make sure everybody leaves here with today, and what I hope to, I would like invite everybody's feedback to present to the full board eventually, is trauma-informed care in WIOA is coming. There has been movement at the federal level in Congress. There's a lot going on at the federal level that will trickle down. There are over 30 states that are being proactive, and I have a bunch of the research. The difference between culturally competent, and that's to your point, Chair Evans, is part of it. But when we consider that we don't know what people's background is with trauma, there is a way to deal with that more intentionally besides just putting people into these programs. And often the trauma itself, like our disconnected youth, to your point, and not understanding it, what that is a barrier already before they even enter the programs.
Okay, thank you very much. Definitely a discussion to be continued. Invite you obviously to come back in this forum, and absolutely I invite everyone here and beyond that may see this presentation to give you feedback so that we can make sure that we address this moving forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
With that, we'll move on to agenda item number 12 for discussion and information only. I would like to recognize Drazen Alez, WIOA Title IV Administrator, and Sheena Childers, Rehabilitation Chief 2 with vocational rehab to present on National Employment with a Disability Month.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair Evans, and good afternoon, members of the subcommittee. My name is Drazen Ellis. I'm the administrator of the Rehabilitation Division. So we are one of the divisions that is part of the Department of Employment Training and Rehabilitation. As we like to say, we are the R&D'er. Our main role of our agency essentially is working with people with disabilities, assisting them in finding gainful employment, and essentially assisting them to achieve that self-sufficiency and self-actualization. So I'll just kind of give a brief introduction. I'll turn it over to Sheena Childers, who is the Bureau Chief of Vocational Rehabilitation and expert in this field. Since we are kind of towards the end of the day, I'm not going to go through a long introduction, just a few words. Essentially, vocational rehabilitation is not just necessarily a government program that has been created to address a need, but essentially more of a movement that started 103 years ago in 1920 with the passage of the first Rehab Act. And the main goal of that was to help individuals with disabilities achieve self-sufficiency through employment. But more broadly, really helping this nation achieve the promise of ensuring that all people, including people with disabilities, have equal opportunity in their pursuit of happiness and their chance at self-actualization. How we achieve that and some of the other aspects, Sheena will go here in a minute, and I'll kind of wrap it up at the end with some final words. So Sheena, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Sheena Childers, Rehabilitation Bureau Chief for the record. Thank you for the invitation to be here and talk a little bit about the program. So as Drazen mentioned, VR is vocational rehabilitation. We are one of the governor's workforce development tools in the toolbox. On this slide, you will see our leadership team. Drazen, you know well, me up in the corner, and then our two deputies. Michelle Merrill is in the bottom left, and Brett Martinez is bottom right. Michelle's over programs, and Brett is over fiscal. And so in October, we celebrate National Disability Employment Awareness Month, or NDEAM. It is a U.S. Department of Labor Office of Disability Employment Policy Initiative that celebrates and brings awareness to disability employment programs, initiatives, and the goal for the month of October. In October, and on NDEAM's website, or DOL's website, which there's a link here at the bottom of this slide, the theme for this year's program or initiative is advancing access and equity for individuals with disabilities. And this year also, we help to celebrate and commemorate 50 years of the Rehab Act of 1973. The Rehab Act is the first real legislative glimpse of the creation and the mandate of the public vocational rehabilitation program. And so the Rehab Act helped to create what we now know as the public VR system and the program in all 50 states. In October, we recognize in our program our why, right? We take time to reflect on our mission, our vision, our core values, including being an active, engaging with Nevada businesses to understand employment needs, creating innovative programs that develop the strengths, priorities, and talents of individuals with disabilities, with the ultimate purpose and mission to ensure that Nevada works for everyone. Our vision, of course, is a skilled and inclusive Nevada workforce. And in VR, our core values are integrity, respect, commitment, accountability, transparency, and optimism. And so in October, And a couple of weeks ago, to kick off INDEEM, or the Disability Employment Awareness Month, we got together as a state and we reflected on our core values, and we helped to remember our collective why in our program. And so that's something that is really important to us and helps to center us as we move forward with our work. A little bit about VR. What is the purpose of VR? We are here to help people with disabilities find jobs, full stop, right? Our purpose and our mandate, again, we are part of the governor's workforce development toolbox to specifically help individuals that have vulnerabilities created by disabling conditions reach employment. You'll see on this slide some key statistics, and these are statistics out of our Nevada State Rehabilitation Council annual report from last year. And so on here, there's a couple of data points. In 22 to 23, we helped 552 plus clients or people with disabilities achieve employment. Their average wage was $15.79. We served 5,000 or 5,500 clients in the program during that year. And the average length of time that our case was open in order to help them achieve employment was about 908 days. And I'll talk a little bit more about some updated data as well. Who do we serve? We serve all disability types, right? So they do need to be a traditional medical model disability. It must be a disabling condition documented by a qualified medical professional. We serve all sensory disability types, physical disabilities, psychological and emotional disabilities, you name it, we will serve those folks. This slide gives you a visual depiction of our clients in terms of disability category. And so you'll see on here in the orange little section of the pie chart, 34% of our clients that we serve have a primary disability of cognitive. And so you might be asking, what does that mean? Things such as intellectual or developmental disability, formerly known as like a mental retardation, now is intellectual disability, right? So that's cognitive impairments created by some of those kinds of conditions. Learning disabilities, cognitive impairments that may be created from an autism spectrum disorder, those kinds of things. Dr. Tyler Garner.
Thank you, Dr. Tyler Garner. For the record, I have a follow-up question, and it's okay if you don't have it today. Maybe we can have a discussion later about it. One of the areas of charge for this particular committee is individuals with special needs or disabilities. And so I'm wondering, is there a employment or unemployment disparity by area? So when we look at these types, do you find some more employed than others or unemployed than others?
So that is a great question, Sheena Childers, for the record. So that is information that I am certain we can get for you, because we stratify a lot of our data by disability group and type of employment outcome. So absolutely, we can look into that and get you that data. I don't have it available to me right at this moment, however. Okay, awesome. Some of the other big heavy hitting disability categories for us, 26% of our clients have a mental health related condition, 21% with a physical condition, 11% having some type of hearing impairment or deafness, 6% having a visual impairment or blindness. Why? So the public VR program Again, it is targeted and specific for individuals with disabilities. And we believe that this is true because we are trying to impact that disparity that Dr. Tyler Garner kind of talked about, right? Trying to bridge the gap between individuals that do not have a disability with those that do have a disability when it comes to employment. And so on this slide, you will see the bottom left employment to population ratio, that percentage disparity. People with a disability are employed at 41.4% and those without a disability at 58.9%. So our services, our programs, our interventions are aimed to try to close that gap whereby we're employing more individuals with a disability at the same rate of those without. And people with disabilities make up the nation's largest minority group, right? So we remind our staff about this constantly, where we might be the person working behind a desk today, but it can take one catastrophic event where we are the recipient across the desk, needing to receive services and being labeled as a person with a disability. Who are our customers? So we have three main kind of customers: job seekers or individuals with disabilities, employers, and then also students and schools. And so this is also information from our NSRC annual report last year, where we have information about the number of clients served being 5,500, the number of employers that we have outreach to or have provided some type of service to at 588, and then students and schools served at 11, 21, and 63 respectively. And so some of the things that we have done to provide services to employers include providing disability sensitivity training, i.e. windmills training, where we will go to employers and businesses and talk about the benefits of hiring persons with disabilities, dispelling disability myths about individuals with disabilities working in different environments, like do workers' comp insurance rates automatically go up if I hire a person with a disability, right? So we do a lot of stigma and dispel myth dispelling with employers. We also have worked to develop work readiness training programs with small businesses here in Nevada, one of which is our Sephora training program, which I'll talk a little bit more about here in a couple of slides, where we are developing. I'm sorry.
Pardon me. Yeah, pardon me, Ms. Childers. I apologize, but I've got to ask you and
3 minutes
Mr. Lipp to wrap up two minutes, because we have one more presenter. Want to be respectful of everyone's time.
Understood. So you guys have the PowerPoint presentation. I'm going to flip a little bit more ahead to talk about some of the initiatives that we have coming up. And if there are questions about our services, I'm happy to take those separately. So upcoming projects and initiatives. I'm happy to report that Nevada is one of 20 states in the nation that was awarded a Disability Innovation Fund grant in the amount of $10 million. This is a $10 million grant over 5 years. And the purpose is to develop and provide partnerships to help individuals that are transition aged youth and children receive services, right? So this is targeted for youth and students with disabilities looking to make the transition between school and post-school activities. And so our project will be launching here in the next few months. Our project is titled Nevada Trip, the Nevada Transitions Roadmap Through Innovative Partnerships Project. And it is a collaboration between us, the Department of Ed, a couple of different school districts throughout the state, as well as our independent living centers, North and South, and some other partners. Our business recognition initiative. So we are back to recognizing businesses locally that do a good job of modeling disability employment. And so we have created a campaign where we recognize and honor those businesses that we think are doing a good job. This year, we had our first recognition ceremony just in September, where we recognized Jack Robb with the State of Nevada Department of Administration and Enrique Pichardo with Sephora, as they were the two leading employers of persons with disabilities in the state last year. And so the state of Nevada is actually a really huge initiative for us. And we were honored to give Director Robb this award because this is a reflection of our 700-hour program, which is a program that is with state government agencies that offer limited appointments to individuals with disabilities for up to 700 hours in state jobs. If they do well, they get automatic and permanent employment. And so the state of Nevada being a model employer for hiring individuals with disabilities has been big and huge. And so we had to honor him. I will talk a little bit about our town hall meetings. This is
Actually,
I gotta cut, you gotta cut me?
I gotta cut you so
Okay.
that, so Drazen can wrap up in a minute. And I apologize. What I want to let everyone know is, we will, along with implementing the template that you saw for the meeting, we will work to manage the presentations better moving forward so we don't short shrift anyone, but at the same time, we really appreciate all the things that are going on throughout the state. Drazen, if you would, please wrap up real quick.
Thank you, Chair Evans. I'll be quick. So as Sheena has mentioned, we definitely have a lot of new initiatives that we're doing to try to ensure that we make the services more readily available to clients and to Nevadans that could benefit from them. One thing that I would just like to highlight is our program is not mandatory program, it's a voluntary program. So folks that are interested in our services have to apply and have to qualify in order to receive the services. We also have done something that I think for one of the first agencies in Nevada that has done this, which is we've made our website available to people, to our constituents in 5 different languages. So all the 5 major spoken languages in Nevada, besides English and Spanish, we also have Tagalog, Korean, and Mandarin, as well as we have ASL translating services right available on our website. Also, over the last couple of years, we have seen a significant increase in folks seeking our services out. We went from during about 2.5 years ago, having somewhere around 80 to 90 applications a month, to now that number reaching more about 320 applications a month to folks seeking our services. So I'll wrap it up there. Thank you, everybody, for allowing us to share our agency.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And very quickly, here's what I want to share. We would love to have you back at a future meeting to give us an update on how things are going. I applaud what the two of you are doing. It's outstanding. And the other thing we want to do is make sure that other entities for some of the other areas that we're focused on know what you're doing as well. So excellent. With that, let me move forward with the agenda. If you would, subcommittee members, if you type in the chat things that you would like to see us address, Vice Chair Tyler Garner and myself will be working on that. And that's related to agenda item 15. With that, we'll move on to agenda item number 13 for discussion and information only. I'd like to recognize Susan Brager. She's the president and chair of SEEDS, and she's going to discuss Battle-Born Burgers, which is an innovative workforce development program tied to Allegiant Stadium. Ms. Brager.
Thank you so much. I appreciate everyone's time, and it's been interesting listening to how many different people are doing so many worthy work-related items that have barriers. So when I was asked to do this, what I'm doing is it's called, the organization that I work with is called SEEDS, and it is Cliff and Lorraine Marshall. They've been very active in our community, and they felt there might be a good way to complement people that have either been incarcerated and are out, or our low income community that is looking for jobs. And I think what's important is that Seeds works hand in hand with Levy organization, which is the host to Allegiant Stadium, to the Convention Authority, to a lot of the hotels. And so what's good about in having people come and get hired, they are sorry, my daughter tried to send me a message. They get trained to where not only do they work at Allegiant Stadium at Battleborn Burgers, but from there they can go on to work for the Levy Corporation, which makes a huge difference for a full-time situation, because as we all know, those that have a past, a lot of businesses don't want you to move to your future. And so what we're trying to do at Seeds is give people a future. And I think the more that we can speak about that, and all of the conversations I've heard today, is maybe we need to actually have a program that can, oh shoot, I forgot what it's called. That's not like me. If they have a past, but enough years have gone by, they didn't murder anybody, they didn't do anything that was a horrible felony, that we can erase that past by a program that's out there to not have to show what they did when they were 18 or 12 or 20. We have that problem, just to let you know, in our, and I know this has been a long meeting, when I was on the commission, for people that wanted to foster their grandparents, and they were 70 years old now or 60 years old now, and when they were 20, they got caught using marijuana. Well, we have to get rid of that past because they've never done it again. So I would advise anything we're looking at for barriers, that you're able to work on that. So as far as the Seeds program, if there's any way that we can help you to promote jobs that can be in fields of becoming a chef, whether it's sew work or a full-fledged cook, then know that there is a program out there within the community. And I'd like to end with this, in case anybody has a question. We all are doing a lot. And I feel like some of us are crossing over into other areas to where more of us are on the same page. I really feel like there wouldn't be as many committees, but yet we can get a lot of work done. And so I just commend everyone that's been on this today. I've been listening since 2 o'clock. And Ken, I appreciate the opportunity to share what Seeds is doing and how we want to help get rid of those barriers for those that have come out of incarceration that want to change their lives.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And and I'll afford the same opportunity to yourself as well, Ms. Brager, to come back and be given a bit more time, maybe even have an individual that's gone through the program come and share. I'll plant that seed so that we can further publicize the program, and possibly here's what we're looking at. I'm sure there, for example, there's stadiums and convention space up north. I wonder if they have a similar program up there. If they don't, that's the reason why we're doing this.
You know, exactly. And I really was very brief because I know it's been 2 hours already, but I wouldn't mind putting together material and getting it to you and letting you know, maybe they could do that in the north, because these jobs are important for those that can't get a job.
Excellent.
So thank you for that time. I appreciate it.
Yep. Thank you. With that, we'll move forward to agenda item number 14. And what I'm going to say here is the individuals from King of Jewels were not available. However, very quickly, what I'll say is that I follow their activities on social media, and I know that they're continuing to work with their cohort, as well as, they work with a larger community at large of students and young men of color. So I know we'll have them back at a future time for agenda item number 14. With that, regarding agenda item number 15, in the interest of time, I just ask everyone, please continue to type into the chat ideas that you'd like us to consider in terms of the next agenda, and we'll make sure that we manage it so we don't have too many presentations, but at the same time, we're trying to get as much exposure as possible, north, south, rural, and yes, the tribal segment of our population as well. But again, if you have ideas for future agenda items or next steps or parking lot items, please type them in the chat. And then at the same time, you're definitely welcome to get that information to Ms. Gilbertson, and then she in turn will get it to either Vice Chair Tyler Garner or myself. Before we move on, I'd like to request that any member of the Barriers and Underserved Populations Subcommittee who arrived late after roll call was taken to please identify themselves at this time so you are marked present.
This is Elaine Silverstone, Director of Workforce Development from GoEd. Happy to be present at the meeting, my first.
Thank you very much and welcome.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, before I do the final public comment, Ms. Thompson-Hilbert asked the question, will these meetings be virtual moving forward? Yes, we had some discussion, and you can anticipate that these meetings will be virtual moving forward. Having said that, the full board meetings, the expectation or the desires that our board members attend those meetings in person, but for these meetings, yes, we'll do these in virtual format moving forward. With that, we'll move to agenda item number 16. This is the second public comment period. Any members of the public are invited to make final comments. Any public comments on the telephone? Any public comments on Zoom? Hearing no further comments, I hereby move to adjourn this meeting. I want to thank everyone. I definitely want to thank all the presenters. Please submit your slide presentation, or if there's other follow-up information that you want to make sure that the subcommittee and beyond the subcommittee, the executive or the full board gets access to, please route all those materials through Ms. Gilbertson, and she'll work with the subcommittee leadership to get the information out to everyone. Thank you, everyone. Great presentations today. A lot of seeds were planted, and look forward to working with everyone to create synergy throughout the state. Thank you very much.
Thank you.